Yeah. Support for On Point comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and from BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public. And Road Scholar, celebrating 50 years of transformative learning adventures for adults in over 100 countries. Learn more at roadscholar.org/explore.
This is KUOW 94.9, Seattle's NPR news station. It's been an action-packed week, and it's a good thing it's almost time for Week in Review. Here is your host, Bill Radke, with a preview of today's show.
Yeah, we have a mayor. There was white smoke released over the King County Elections Office, and the county cardinal proclaimed Habemus Maiorum. Now, Mayor Wilson may or may not be infallible, but in any case, what are her plans for the city? We'll discuss that. Also, Washington Congressmember Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez did a deal with the Republicans and helped reopen the government. Does that make her a wolf in Democrats' clothing or a pragmatist in a swing district in swing clothing? And I think I just saw my panelists smile. Can I get them to tell me what they're beaming about? We always find out by the end of the show, so my voice sounds smoky. Stay tuned.
Texas relies pretty heavily on immigrants for its labor force.
Hundreds of thousands, in some cases, maybe even millions of work permits are being canceled. And so that's really what's affecting employers most directly.
I'm Kai Rizdal. What the president's immigration crackdown looks like in the Texas economy. That is next time on Marketplace.
Marketplace comes your way at 2:30 and then again at 6:30 here at KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham, and wherever you go on the KUOW app. We're a self-sustaining service of the University of Washington.
Support for KUOW comes from HX Expeditions, working to connect travelers to Antarctica and beyond for 130 years. On board science and education programs, wildlife encounters, and all-inclusive adventures on small ship expedition cruises. More at travelhx.com. Change the way you see the world.
KUOW would like to recognize members of the community who included a gift to this station in their will. You are hearing programming today thanks to the generosity of Leslie Hazelton, Joanne Yort, Tony Krupski, Dr. Michael Len, Estella Berger Leopold, Billie Jean Matthews, Pat Reese, Eugene and Helen Schmieden, Cheryl Schneider, David Tagliani, Vivian Van de Beesen, Norma Wells, and others who left a legacy with KUOW.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The election interference criminal case in Georgia against President Trump and several others will move ahead after a new prosecutor was appointed before today's deadline. Alex Hudson of member station WABE reports.
Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis originally brought the massive RICO case, but was removed by a Georgia court for her personal relationship with a special prosecutor. The Prosecuting Attorney's Council of Georgia Executive Director Pete Skandalakis was ordered to appoint a new prosecutor, but each one he approached respectfully declined. Skandalakis said that dismissal at this point was not the right course of action and has named himself to lead the case and perform what he called a comprehensive review to determine how to proceed. In a statement, the president's lead defense counsel, Steve Sadow, calls the case a politically charged prosecution and says that a review of the facts will lead to dismissal. For NPR News, I'm Alex Hudson in Atlanta.
Border Patrol agents are being sent to the North Carolina city of Charlotte, a Democratic stronghold. Critics note there are no immigration-related borders in Mecklenburg County. President Trump's defended similar deployments to other cities as anti-crime actions. In Chicago, protests erupted outside an ICE detention facility there and activists were arrested. In Chicago, a federal judge has ordered hundreds of immigrants arrested by the federal government to be released. The Chicago Sun-Times' John Sadel.
Throughout the last few months, we've had multiple judges find that the Trump administration's arguments in court lack credibility. And the public face of this has been this U.S. Border Patrol Commander, Greg Bovino. Last week, I was in court when a judge specifically said that he had lied about being hit in the head with a rock before tossing tear gas. So while, yes, the federal government is claiming success and that this is important work, there's also a lot of people challenging their claims.
Heavy rain swept across Gaza overnight, soaking tents and flooding the ruins of bombed-out homes. The United Nations says nearly 30,000 homes have been destroyed during the war. NPR's Aya Batrawi reports aid groups warn that only a fraction of the supplies needed for shelter are getting in, even with a ceasefire in place.
The Norwegian Refugee Council, which oversees tent supplies in Gaza, says Israel is blocking the entry of life-saving shelter materials for 1.5 million people. They say Israel's rejected nearly all requests from 9 aid groups to bring in tents, ceiling kits, bedding, and blankets, adding these are urgently needed as Gaza faces its third winter since the start of the war. UN agencies say people are also struggling to eat enough due to obstacles and red tape. Israel is only allowing goods to enter through 2 crossings, despite saying a third crossing would open, this one for northern Gaza, where famine was declared over the summer. Israel's military says it's not limiting aid and that hundreds of trucks of goods are entering daily. It did not respond to further questions.
It's NPR News.
You're listening to KUOW News. I'm Ruby DeLuna. The switch to a new city administration is officially underway in Seattle. Mayor Bruce Harrell has conceded, and Mayor-elect Katie Wilson is preparing for her transition team. KUOW's Amy Radel reports.
Mayor Bruce Harrell on Thursday saluted his progressive challenger, Katie Wilson, as the city's next mayor and said his proudest achievement was the diversity of his own administration.
It wasn't because they were diverse, it was because they were the best. And that being a biracial black man, I didn't have any prejudices going into an interview process.
Katie Wilson accepted Harrell's concession. She claimed a mandate from voters to seek affordable housing, universal child care, and strong transit systems.
For my administration, I think you're going to see a combination of folks who have long experience in City Hall, who know the ins and outs of the executive branch, and also some new blood, right?
And she promised more details about her own plans next week. Amy Radel, KUOW News.
In other news, and this for pickleball fans, Washington will be rolling out specialty license plates dedicated to our official state sport. Yes, pickleball. And that isn't the only new plate drivers that drivers will be able to get their hands on. Other plate themes include Smoky Bear, Mount St. Helens, honeybees and pollinators, LeMay America's Car Museum, and Keep Washington Evergreen. The pickleball plate is expected to be available next Wednesday. Others will be released in the coming months. It'll be the last wave of new plate designs in Washington until 2029. You're listening to KUOW News.
I'm Tim Franks, host of BBC NewsHour. Coming up today, a huge Russian bombardment of Ukraine. Can Israelis and Palestinians speak to each other, not just past each other? The BBC formally apologises to Donald Trump, and the ancient diversity of dogs.
Coming up on BBC NewsHour at 1 p.m.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke, here today with Seattle Channel host and producer and co-host of the podcast Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Welcome back, Brian Callanan.
Good to be here. Thanks, Bill.
Good to see you. Senior researcher at Washington Policy Center. Welcome back, Paul Guppy.
Thanks. Great to be here.
And welcome back, local transportation advocate Alex Hudson. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we can be seen because we're streaming the show on YouTube. So you listener, you could be a viewer. Just go to YouTube and search KUOW Public Radio. You have just been waved at. And let's just get into our top story, shall we? I think we all know what it is. This week, Seattle heard from its newly elected mayor. Katie Wilson is new to elected office, period. She identifies as a Democrat and as a socialist, but says she's not super ideological. So, Mayor-elect, what is your to-do list?
There's an awful lot that I want to accomplish as mayor. I want everyone in this great city of ours to have a roof over their head. I want universal childcare and free K-8 summer care. I want world-class mass transit. I want great, safe public spaces where kids can run around with abandon. I want stable, affordable housing for renters. I want social housing. I want much more land and wealth to be owned and stewarded by communities instead of corporations. I want a robust economy with thriving small businesses, great living wage jobs, and strong rights for workers. I want a city where everyone has the basics of a dignified life, including healthy food, access to health care, and supportive communities. I want a city where your health and your life expectancy and your children's future doesn't depend on your zip code or your race.
Okay, what got your attention on that list?
Just that there was so much of it, I guess. I mean, it was a wide-ranging list. And I think in looking at this election, certainly something that it's a sea change for the city of Seattle, I think you have to say. Came back from a large deficit on election night and came away with one of the closest wins for a mayoral race in recent history for the city of Seattle. And I think in looking at that list, it does seem a little pie in the sky. I think there's a lot to it. Yeah, just a little bit. But
any more pie than usual? Isn't that what?
Right.
Don't mayor-elects serve us pie?
Take a big slice. I think what I'm interested in with this is to see that this was very much a grassroots campaign that got Katie Wilson elected, and she said that in her press conference as well. And when it comes down to, okay, that's a great way to get elected, but then she is going to have to start playing ball with some of the different constituencies in town. We're talking about labor. She's got a lot of labor support on her side. She's going to be talking with business as well. So what I'm really interested in is if she's going to achieve those goals, who is she going to bring into her camp to make that happen? She's been talking about her staff. She's saying that she's going to release some of those names next week. I asked one of her crew there a little bit about, okay, so who are we talking about here? Because she's not going to be filling it up with all these progressive voices. There has to be a wider range than that. And that staffer said to me, there's going to be some surprises on that list. So that's the part I'm interested in. If she is going to be a mayor for all, again, as she said, what are the different groups, shareholders that she's going to bring in to try to make these different messages and hope she has? How's she going to make them happen?
Yeah. And, it was not going to be easy, but I think that all of this is doable. Like, who doesn't hear a list like that and say, I want to live in that city, right? That's the vision.
But who hears a list like that and says, all of this is doable? What makes you say that, Alex?
You know why? Because I've been to other places. And unlike the pouring rain outside right now, these social and economic conditions that we all live under, it's not the weather. We choose this and we can change it, and it's not like this everywhere. There are places that you can go. I was in Japan earlier this month, and there aren't people sleeping on the street. This morning at my bus stop, there was a woman in a wheelchair who looked to be in her 80s sleeping outside in the rain. Like, it's unacceptable. And it's a moral degradation of ourselves and each other. And it's not like this everywhere. And so I really believe that with this kind of gumption, with sort of this laser focus, and with somebody with so much experience in organizing, in making policy change and bringing people together, right? Like, that's what Katie has been doing. She's a coalition builder. She has been for decades in this city. And she's really accountable, to people sleeping in a bus stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually you're referring to what I was going to mention, which is the importance of core government services. I agree that in a caring, moral community, we don't let people live on the streets and in the weather that we have. And that's a function for the city to step in and provide services and help people who are homeless. Her longer list, however, sounds like the socialist vision of heaven on earth, which has been tried and tried in other countries, and it's just not achievable, and it can actually be counterproductive. So what struck me about it is it may be reflecting her inexperience in public office.
Why is it not achievable? I haven't spent that much time in Northern Europe, but I hear stories. Well,
but I'll get.
I mean, there are democratic socialist countries. Go on.
Right. Yeah, I will address that. My point is about, I don't think she quite has learned yet that to govern means to decide, and that means you have to pick priorities. The government city budget is $8.5 billion. I don't think that's enough money to provide everything that she's looking for. So what does that mean for the tax burden for property taxes or sales taxes? And Brian makes a good point that she's going to have a whole raft of entrenched interests and legitimate constituencies to deal with. So in other words, governing is balancing and compromise and setting priorities. And to the point about socialist contradictions is that there's a difference between the government and the community. That I don't think it's right for the government to try to do everything for us, and I think that's counterproductive. Safe public spaces, good schools, caring for the homeless, those are government functions. But she also says that she wants thriving small businesses, great jobs, and a great economy. Well, if you have this heavy regulatory and tax burden, which is, in my opinion, already hurting the city because it's so expensive to live here, it sounds like she's just going to add to that burden. So if you go through her list, it's like items 1, 2, 3, and 4 are working against items 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's what I mean by she'll have to resolve these contradictions by making choices.
Any reaction to that?
I mean, one of the things that I will say is that the status quo isn't free. And like, so when we talk about what are we paying for and what do things cost, we tend to think about like, what does it cost to add new things?
You mean the cost of government?
The cost of social services, the cost of government, like the cost of allowing people to suffer so cruelly, right? Like, our backstop now is that most people who are in desperate need end up in our public hospitals. It's $16,000 a week just to keep somebody inside of Harborview. It's a lot of money, and they don't have the resources to pay those bills, and so we, the taxpayers, pick that up.
Yeah, so nobody's in favor of that. My point is that the government needs to be effective in addressing social problems like that,
right?
And instead of just letting them drift, every mayor that I've seen for years says that they're going to solve and help the homeless, and they never do. So maybe this mayor will take a different approach.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that when we solve those problems, we get some money back, and then we can reinvest that in the things that contribute into an upward spiral.
And I think this focus on homelessness is a really important one because you're right, Paul. I mean, I can think of just about every mayor that I've talked to over the past 2 decades here. We're talking about McGinn and Durkin and Murray. They're all, and Harold too, all made these promises on the campaign trail. I'm going to set aside these 2,000 units or 1,000 units or what have you when it comes to providing shelter for the homeless or supportive housing, things of this nature. And Katie Wilson has talked about that too. She's talking about maybe as many as 4,000 shelter units out there. And that is something I'm really focused on. And I know she is too, because it's something that's big. It's a moonshot kind of a goal. How do you do that within the tax structure we have now? Is she going to be talking about new taxes? I think she will. She has a number of supportive people on the council who I think are listening to that. But that's one of those, I think, issues for me at least, that I feel like she's going to be jumping in and really focusing on quickly, because it is something I know, aside from affordability, which it's connected to affordability, homelessness is. If you can look at it and the whole spectrum of affordability, going all the way down the ladder, if you will, to homelessness and trying to work your way up to different pieces like social housing, et cetera. I know it's a big list, but that piece about housing for homeless people specifically and shelter is one I think is going to be a really important one in the first 90 days.
But I think the government needs to do more than just physical housing, because people have addictions and mental health issues. So without therapy and job training and getting someone on a productive course in their life, they just end up back on the street doing drugs again. So I think that the city has to address that. It's not just so-called housing first, because we've tried that for decades and it doesn't solve the problem.
The wonderful thing about housing affordability is that done in the way that makes the most economic sense is it actually doesn't cost the city anything, right? The reason housing,
unless you're into environmental review, and permits,
take it easy. Right
now we're really getting into it.
Next topic,
housing
zoning.
Affordability is a housing problem, right? The problem is that there isn't enough of it. The reason there isn't enough of it is because we've constrained where and how much of it we can build. Like it is free for the government to delete those restrictions and allow the market to create the housing that will create enough supply to meet the demand, give everybody who wants here to have a place to live that they can afford in the neighborhood that they choose. So some of this stuff like actually doesn't cost us a lot of money, and when we have enough housing for everybody, as I said, we get to diminish how much or reduce how much we're spending on social services, and we get the benefit of more property tax and other kinds of things coming in to generate revenue for the city.
Okay, so we know that Mayor Wilson will propose progressive revenue, ways of raising money. Some of it may go to court, and it's not just up to the mayor. She has a new city council, a couple of new faces, et cetera. We have not yet talked about law enforcement. And there is a new city attorney as well. What do you have any guesses, educated guesses about how this government will differently enforce its laws, whether that's encampments or shoplifting or you name it? What do you expect?
I have a sense on this that just right off the
prostitution,
right,
drug,
stay out of areas
sales,
of prostitution, stay out of drug areas. I know that the city attorney, who's incoming here, Erica Evans, is not a fan of those soap and soda laws, so we'll see how that plays out. But I think there are a lot of people who are very tired of, and Katie Wilson wrote a really interesting op-ed about this in January, even before she decided to run.
Yeah, in The Stranger.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting and how the left, basically got it wrong on homelessness, et cetera. And it's a very good, nuanced view. Highly recommend in reading that. And I think that might provide at least some path forward here. And in talking with her as well, I think it's a situation where she's not going to fire the new police chief, because that's a huge job to try to fill that position here. But she has been talking a lot about really trying to ramp up, and this is something that Bruce Harrell did before he left office here, ramping up these 911 alternatives, meaning this care team that goes out there, community assisted response and engagement. These are social workers who are going out on the street and help with these person down in the doorway type of situations or whatever else. So I'm seeing that program ramp up. I'm hoping that together with a strong police department, she wants to support that. I'm hoping that can provide some of these different answers that people are looking for, because a lot of times, yes, of course, there are smash and grab robberies and things of this nature, but a lot of times it's this where public safety and public health kind of meet, that nexus right there. And that's and that's a big part of the homelessness issue, the drug issue as well. All these things conflate. I'm not saying that all homeless people are drug users or anything like that, but we have all these issues overlaid with each other. And if you have a strong police department and these different alternatives, I feel like that's the path that she's going to try to chart going forward. We'll see what she does.
Yeah, I think those are creative options. I'm a policy guy, so I'm all for trying new things. But really, the public has a right to and deserves to see results, no matter where you are on the political spectrum.
Yes.
So to me, in Seattle's great neighborhoods, I think that there are really two reasons that small businesses struggle and fail. One is public safety, and the other one is high taxes. And high utility taxes, property taxes, sales tax, all these things combined.
So you want a wealth tax? Is that what I'm hearing?
Ooh, wait a minute.
I would be, or trade that off for a tax relief someplace else. But in Seattle, taxes only go up; they never go down. So, and that adds up along with all kinds of other regulations, combined with shoplifting, low-level crime, car theft, things
wage
like
theft.
Okay, one topic at a time. I'm just talking about the physical conditions in the city, and if you don't have peace and safety in your community, you can't have all these other great things that she is talking about. Great communities, thriving businesses, great jobs. So a real focus on the basics, however she delivers it. But I really think the people in the city are frustrated. Maybe that's why they throw out the mayor virtually every 4 years.
Yeah.
People are really looking for a peaceful, more just, livable communities where you can engage in commerce and not be exposed to dangers in public spaces.
Yeah, amen. I live in First Hill. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and I want to be able to freely send her to the grocery store that's just 3 blocks from my house.
You want her to be able to go out by herself and enjoy the community.
Absolutely. Everybody wants that. I, kind of speaking about the other people who've been elected in this election cycle, I really think that we are set up to have the most interesting political dynamic in the city of Seattle.
Does interesting mean better?
Yeah, I do actually, because I think that we have a really balanced city council. You've got 3 council members who are holding down the progressive left. You've got 3 city council members who are on the other side, whatever, we always scrap about what we want to call that. And you've got 3 folks who are kind of in the middle. And that balanced set of government is where you get strong values, strong alignment, but also the need to compromise in order to get things done. So when you've got a mayor with as alluring a vision as the Wilson vision is, and a balanced legislative body in that way, I really do feel like we are about to enter potentially, hopefully, fingers crossed, one of the most productive eras of public policy making in the city of Seattle.
I need to pause us there because we're doing a lot of speculating and finger crossing, and there'll be plenty of time to see what happens.
Yeah.
Before we take a break, I want to play a little audio from our mayor-elect yesterday on the picket line with striking Starbucks workers.
That is why I am proud to join them on their picket line and proud to say loud and clear, I am not buying Starbucks and you should not either. And I would like to close with a message to Starbucks. This is your hometown and mine. Seattle's making some changes right now. And I urge you the right thing. Because in Seattle, when workers' rights are under attack, what do we do? When workers' rights are under attack, what do we do? When workers' rights are under attack, what do we do? Because this is your city. Thank you very much.
How many mayors call for a boycott of one of their city's premier companies and largest employers?
Ooh. She had a lot of different labor support and has for many years in the work that she's done, and so I hear what you're saying. That's a big step for her to act in that way, and I think it speaks to this larger ethic, and I just wanted to talk about this, Paul, with regard to how taxes are structured in our city, because I think this is a part of the conversation. I think she really sprang into office because of call it the tax the rich type of a situation, but it was that social housing measure that was on the ballot back in February. Bruce Harrell came out with an option that said, hey, you know what? We want to use some of these existing revenues. And Katie Wilson was like, no, we want to use this new system where we're going to be bringing in more money from larger companies out there. And you know what? People in Seattle supported.
Voters said yes.
Voters said yes to that, not the Bruce Harrell version. Yeah. And I this was a bone of contention, I know, during the actual campaign, but that was that big split issue that got Katie Wilson into this race. So there's something there. Is it smart to really, really tax our big businesses so much that they don't want to stay around town or they ship their employees elsewhere? That's definitely a question, but it's super popular among voters right now. And I think that's something that has to be reckoned with. The city of Seattle has talked about this over the past couple months, the Seattle Shield measure they put in place to basically restructure our business and occupation tax situation such that the larger businesses are paying more for that. Smaller businesses, actually a lot of them are paying nothing or maybe a lot less than what they were before. So I think there's an effort to try to rejigger somehow a tax structure that is certainly regressive in our state. And that's going to be part of this conversation, too, when we talk about these programs that she's trying to fund and how she's going to pay for it.
Okay.
So again, what strikes me is learning curve. It's one thing to be, an activist and press for worker rights or to support a boycott against a major employer in Washington, in Seattle. But it's another thing to have executive power as the mayor. So that definitely sends a signal to even mega corporations like Starbucks. They hear that message. And it reminds me of when Boeing moved their headquarters from Seattle to Chicago. They didn't announce it in advance. There was no public discussion. Businesses make decisions, behind closed doors based on what they think is best for themselves. Starbucks is already closing stores nationally and internationally, and I just think more of that cutback will happen in Seattle if Seattle leaders are sending a signal, we're creating a more difficult business climate for you. The same thing happened with Amazon, which just reduced 1,800 jobs in Seattle. They're cutting across the country, and yet a higher proportion of the cuts happen in Seattle in terms of removing jobs. And I really think that's businesses' quiet way of adjusting to what they see as a more hostile business climate in the city. A new mayor, I think, should be welcoming and say, the red carpet is out for businesses. We want you to come and work here. And that.
But this is a labor dispute. And
well, that's my
sides.
point. Yeah. That's my point. Instead of being kind of above the fray and saying, or even saying, I support Starbucks workers as policy, that makes sense. But then to be on the picket line and definitely weigh in on one side. And Starbucks hears that. Yeah. And there is some regional manager out there who has to make a decision about where the next Starbucks store is going to close. Mm-hmm. And don't be surprised if that tends to happen inside the city.
We got to take a break. We're going to come back. Have I invited you yet to Year in Review? Everybody, we're doing it again this year, Town Hall Seattle. Do you think the mayor-elect would come?
That'd be great.
On Year in Review and accept her Person of the Year award, Mayor-elect Wilson.
Just careful what coffee you serve.
You heard it here first.
Right. I'm down on one knee.
Sure.
You can't see me now. Come to Town Hall Seattle. Make me the happiest host on earth. Okay, Year in Review. Thursday, December 4th, 7:30, Town Hall, Seattle. To find out more, get your tickets, go to KUOW.org/events. We'll be right back with more Week in Review.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family-owned and specializing in start-to-finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com.
KUOW provides news and stories that matter to you. You can support KUOW in a way that works best for you. Consider a gift of stock, donating a vehicle, or making a donation from a donor-advised fund. There are many ways to help ensure KUOW stays strong and continues serving the community with local news and storytelling. Your support makes a difference in keeping KUOW thriving. Learn more about different ways to give at kuow.org/support.
My panelist, Alex Hudson, advocates for local transportation, and she's sitting next to Paul Guppy here from Washington Policy Center, who is sitting with Brian Callanan from Seattle Channel and Seattle News, Views, and Brews. And at one end of the room, I'm Bill Radke with Week in Review. And we've been talking about the news this week, as we do. We talked about Seattle's budget deficit a little bit. What about getting some money from the state? They've got more taxpayers. The legislature is considering a wealth tax, Paul Guppy. Is that going to happen, finally?
Well, I hope it doesn't happen, and the reason is because when it comes to tax policy, I'm pretty much agnostic. That is to say, whatever raises revenue for the state or the city in a fair way, that does not, suppress. There's also an ethical aspect to it, is that the government doesn't have a right to just take all your money, no matter who you are. So I really get worried about
the proposal to take all your money is looking
exactly.
Yeah,
that's a little bit of the exaggeration.
Cannot whip the votes for
but
that.
Just the idea that they can just, this goes back to the founding of the country, is that the authority of the government to just confiscate your goods is a principle that I don't think that we should forget in the effort to create a fair tax system. So I understand that. Regarding the wealth tax itself, it was proposed in the last legislative session. It failed. It may have more support coming up. But the second thing about a tax system is, just besides the morality of taking people's money and using it effectively, is the practicality of creating a more hostile environment in the state against high wealth people coming here. And by the way, the tax would apply 9.9% as proposed to incomes of $1 million or more. And even though that sounds like that is an enormous income, very high earners. But think about the people who make money like that. They're doctors, high-tech executives, investors, people who bring a lot of wealth and investment into an economy in the private sector and make it grow. And by sending a signal to those folks saying, move your address to another state.
To one of those 8 states that doesn't have an income tax.
Tennessee repealed their income tax. And a lot of the reason they did it is because they saw Florida and Texas and even Washington State were attracting a lot of high-wealth individuals who invest in their communities into the state. So it's, in a lot of ways, a wealth tax sounds like a great bumper sticker, but it can be really counterproductive.
Okay. Anyone else?
I hear exactly what you're saying, Paul. At the same point, though, when you look at the income inequality that exists in our state and around the country, it's just difficult for people. And I think that's why we've seen at the state level, when voters said, yes, we want to keep this capital gains tax a couple years ago, when we've seen it at the city level, there's a lot of support for this, for trying to equate this system. I hear exactly what you're saying. I don't want to push people out either, but certainly I think the average person has been maybe hearing a lot about how this is going to trickle down to them at some point in their lives, and they're just not seeing it. So in terms of that wealth and how it kind of comes down the ladder and helps out their communities or their families, et cetera. So I just think that's the challenge. I hear exactly what you're saying. I don't want to push people out either, but when you have that gap in income, I think people really feel it.
So just quickly on that, is that the new revenue is never used for tax relief someplace else. So I would be more favorable to this if the state cut the property tax, imposed a wealth tax or an income tax, and reduced taxes someplace else in order to address that inequality. Okay. But there's never tax relief. It's always added money from the government, which, again, to me raises an ethical problem about greed in the public sector.
But sometimes there's cost relief, right? So, like, part of the idea of raising some of the, like for instance, giving your child free healthcare or free, or like making the public education be something that you can count on as being available as a good choice for your family, right? So, if what we're doing is we're creating, revenue that we put into services, not even social services, just public services, right? Like, I care a lot about transportation. AAA says that it costs $13,000 to own, operate, and maintain a vehicle in the state of Washington. Most people have to have 2 cars in their family in order to get around. So if we have great public transit that makes it so that you can go to a 1-car family, well, then the government just put $13,000 back in your pocket. And so same thing with like like you, Paul, you know this, right? The state budget is pretty much education and healthcare. And when we are reducing the ability to invest in that, then those premiums go up for people, or the child care costs go up for people. So some of it is about, I hear you about the taxes, and that is true, but also being able to keep costs down for people is another way that we make sure that hardworking Washingtonians get to make their household budgets make sense.
Hey, is this another reason to keep billionaires in your state? The former head of Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, his philanthropy is donating $1.7 billion over 10 years for Washington State's free preschool program. Governor Ferguson said this will let the state add 10,000 kids to the program.
It's going to take time to ramp up to realize the full magnitude of the gift and the partnership. But we are going to be moving heaven and earth to make that happen.
This is early learning, health screening, nutrition support, family services for low-income families. Enrollment's 15,000 now, so maybe this gift takes you to 25,000. Paul, you said there's a catch?
Well,
is there a string attached?
I always have to be the political science guy about the structure. Is that maybe I'll tell a quick story. When I worked at HUD, at Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C., there were developer companies that wanted to provide volunteers for housing programs, and there was actually a federal regulation against that. And I raised the question, I was in the legislative office, like, what's wrong with having these volunteers? And the answer back was, the volunteers come with strings, and we don't want private entities to be influencing and controlling the way a public program runs. And I compliment Ballmer for donating money to childcare. That's great, but it already comes with strings attached. So in other words, the management of the program begins to move away from state legislators and elected officials and being influenced by what the donor is giving. And that, I think there's just a warning.
The condition I saw was that the state can't reduce the number of state-funded seats.
Right.
But how is that grabbing the management of the system?
Well,
what's the problem?
Again, it's creeping, and I don't mean to be a wet blanket about this, okay? Because supporting the program is good.
How about moist?
Yeah,
okay,
right.
so
a little damp.
I'll be a little damp here. But to me, that's the warning sign. So that's already a budget decision that has been made by an outside private entity in return for $1.7 billion. You, the state, have to make a budget decision that's not made in the public realm, but is made by this private donor. And it all looks positive, but I just think that begins to take us down a road where private entities are having undue influence on public programs.
Yeah. At the same point, I mean, this was a state legislature that made a lot of cuts in this very area in the last session here earlier this year. So I think it was I guess if you want to call it a warning shot or something along those lines, I think there's a lot of support to try to keep these levels of early childhood education slots. I mean, keep those or increase them, because the legislature was promising an increase in these spots over the last couple of years.
They did not deliver.
No, they did not at all. And so I think that's part of this equation too. And again, I think it goes back to an economic piece like you were talking about, Alex. If you can actually have quality childcare for your young person there, then guess what? Mom and dad can go work, whatever happens there. So you're bringing a lot more money into the economy too. So I think it's a good investment. It certainly prepares kids better for school, and I'm hoping for good things. But I definitely hear what you're saying, Paul. I mean, when you're involving private interests into the public good, you do have to be careful.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't want the provision of public services to be reliant on
private
the
sources,
goodwill of private sources. And again, I commend this investment, and for the 10,000 people who just got money back in their pockets and get to go to work and know that their kids getting a good education and a fair start, like, good for them. And I do think, though, however, like, I would hate to see things like this allow the government to kind of reduce its own investment.
Well,
and so
exactly.
it should be. So I agree with the stipulation, and I agree with I don't know. I'm taking both sides here, but but yeah, the private investment shouldn't supplant the government's own core responsibility, and hopefully we live in a world where we can just allocate the resources to meet the problems.
So I can solve this whole problem with one phone call to Steve Ballmer, which is, I think he should give the $1.7 billion directly to families, low-income families that need it, and then the family makes the decision about which daycare to go to. So that
Steve Ballmer, you got to means test that thing yourself, pal.
Exactly. But in other words, true charity and philanthropy would help individuals and families not be funneled through a public program, and that way he could help early child care education and directly help families at the same time, and not intrude on the management of a public program.
Universal basic income.
Oh, wait a minute.
The Ballmer income. Okay, I want to talk, since we're talking about the government here, the federal government is reopening. It takes a little time, but it's reopening. Brian just celebrated there with jazz hands. Yeah. And what happened is a few Democrats broke with the rest of their party and made a deal. 8 Democrats in the Senate, 6 in the U.S. House, including Western Washington's Maria Gluesenkamp-Perez. Alex, a lot of Democrats are angry with her for helping make that deal. Do you feel betrayed?
No, I don't feel betrayed. And I think, the question was this the right thing to do? And I think it depends on how we define right. Was this the right thing for her to be able to hold her seat? Yeah. Her district, District 3, has not elected a Democrat in 15 years. So every time somebody calls that district a swing district, I got to bristle. It is not a swing district. It's a red district. And she pulled off a miracle there. It
swung once. It's a swung district.
Exactly. Yeah. Not swinging. Was this the right thing to get the money flowing back to families in need who can't afford to miss another paycheck or have their SNAP benefits cut? If you're figuring out how to feed your family and get your paycheck flowing, yeah, that was the right thing for you. Is this the right thing to keep her popular with her caucus? Definitely not. But she's been very clear that she is a district representative and that she's willing to, go against the party. And I think the reminder here is that, Republicans weren't going to negotiate. Republicans have no interest in providing affordable health care for Americans. And
this is the big complaint is that Democrats are saying we didn't get the extension of the tax credit, so health insurance is going to soar.
But in fairness, Republicans are willing to negotiate on that issue after the government opens. That was their.
They're going to have that vote, they say.
Yeah. Well, I'll be.
You can wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be holding my breath for that one, and I just feel like it is a disappointment that the governing party is forcing the choice that Americans either starve together or die alone. And I would really like to see a ruling party who takes very seriously how many people are sick and hungry in this country.
And I mean, past that too, I'm very interested to see if and when this vote happens in December, as some of the leaders of the Republican caucus have talked about here. So that is a wait and see type of situation. And it's so interesting with the Affordable Care Act. It has been such a bugaboo for so long for Republican. It's a target for them, and I can understand that. But then at the same time, I want a solution on the other side of it. It's not enough for me to tear this down. Give me a solution that's out there that you've talked to shareholders about, that you've built some support for, that people can get on board with. And that's the big part of this discussion that's missing. Sure, we can argue about the Affordable Care Act. Yep, let's tear it down. Okay, now what? That's the part I always come back to on this.
So I love the mechanics of government and democracy, and there have been 22 government shutdowns since the late 1970s. I lived through some of them when I worked in Congress, and so I recognize these mechanics coming way ahead of time. One thing on the practical side of politics, and maybe this is what the Congresswoman saw, is that there's no point in creating a showdown if the other side is holding all the cards. And as you just pointed out, Trump and the Republicans were like, we're not going to negotiate on this issue, health care subsidies.
They have the House and Senate.
Yeah, until the government opens up again. And They just sat there for 43 days, and I think the Democrats, certainly 8 senators, Democratic senators, saw that there was no win here, and they joined the Republicans in opening the government to provide the SNAP funding that's needed, and to prevent TSA from locking down and canceling.
Maybe they already got the win by focusing so much attention on it. Republicans kept saying, we don't want to extend those tax credits.
Yeah. Well, great. That's a great point, because the Democrats did win on debating the issue. So, and they did get this guaranteed vote in the Senate that's going to happen. So they won putting the issue on the agenda. That they definitely did that. But I think what Glusenkamp Perez recognized is that, and I'm sure she went to her leadership and said this, because I've seen this dynamic in Congress as well, that behind the scenes a member says, like, look, I just can't be with you on this, okay, because it's going to hurt me back in my district. I'm facing a tough re-election next year, which she is, because you're right, it's not a swingy district. So anyway, you can see there are a lot of elements here. I'll get to the point, which is that it makes perfect sense for individual members to go to their leadership and say, I've stuck with you this long, but there's a limit, and I got to start thinking about the next election cycle. And democracy is all about representing your constituents, and I think she made that calculation, and it makes perfect sense. If Democrats had been winning on the issue, then it would pay to hold out. But I think they weren't gaining anything, and the pain of shutting down the government on Americans across the board was really beginning to bite. So they were just...
So maybe not just her re-election, but the fact that people didn't have food stamps and people were working without pay.
Absolutely, So you're not, in other words, you're engaged in this huge political fight, but you're not gaining anything from it. So at some point you have to find a way to hit the exit ramp and close it off. And the person who's really taken the hit on this is Leader Schumer in the Senate, and he's in trouble now. But rank and file House members like Glusenkamp Perez, she is, as I say, she's representing her home district and maybe thinking about the interests of the country as a whole as well.
Okay. Yeah, and you can't negotiate if nobody has leverage. And the governing party, the Republicans, showed that they were willing to go all the way to the Supreme Court to keep Americans hungry. And so, like, if they're not willing to come to the table because they don't share, like, the kind of basic dignity of taking care of their constituents, then at some point the Republicans forced the hand.
Yep, it's those evil Republicans every time.
Alex Hudson with the talking points.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I didn't make that up. That's in the paper.
Yes, I got it.
I mean, if you want to do partisan, Republicans voted 14 times to open the government, and Democrats
Paul Guppy with the talking points.
Yeah.
So let me pause here, and we're going to take a break, and we've got a little more to talk about, local food scene and the local not housing near the port scene and what made you smile, stuff like that when we come right back. We've got Paul Guppy here and Brian Callanan and Alex Hudson, and I'm Bill Radke, and I'm assuming that you're going to stay tuned.
Support for KUOW comes from UW Medicine, where the same doctors caring for patients are also helping to advance medical research and teaching the next generation of physicians. More at uwmedicine.org. UW Medicine, a higher degree of healthcare.
And from the Real Estate Finance and Development Group at Ryan Swanson Law, lawyers contributing to the development and redevelopment of multiple properties and real estate projects in the Northwest. More information at ryanswansonlaw.com.
Paul Guppy and Alex Hudson are having a good conversation over
Still
here.
at it. Still at it.
Brian Callanan,
I'll be right over here.
We're here. Bill Radke here. Continuing to bring you a week in review. We've got 15 minutes left. So, for one thing, remember Katie Wilson, Mayor-elect Katie Wilson's Pizza is Expensive video? We got some more numbers this week about how expensive restaurant chains are in Washington, how expensive Seattle takeout is. Alex, what does all that tell you?
Tells me that it's hard to open and keep a business open. I really feel like eating out in our city has become a luxury, and that is it's bad for our city. I want to live in a city where I can go out and take my family out or go meet friends, and increasingly that becomes a really difficult thing to do.
So you want to lower the minimum wage? Is that what you're saying?
No, I actually think that there's some key drivers that sort of get that go under the radar a lot on this conversation. Commercial rent is one of them. Triple bottom rent. Also insurance. Insurance is through the roof, and so some of these are really difficult things for certainly a local government to take care of. But these trends have been going on for a long time, so it's not just like the recent minimum wage has increased costs for folks at all. But I brought this one in because I was reading the top 13 bites in the Seattle Times, and the opening paragraphs. Man, I thought I was reading a eulogy for restaurants.
Sad. Yeah. It was basically that you can't try anything, right? I don't remember exactly, but the gist was that it's hard for restaurants to survive. The ones that do are not taking chances
as much. Yeah.
Right.
It gets really similar. Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. It's an expensive place to live, and those costs are part of it. And I can't tell if it's the new dollars coming in from the tech world that are part of that too, and what's demanded there. But I do think that restaurant scene is really changing. And from what I've seen, I live in the West Seattle area, and you'll run into a few different places where they're trying to make these different changes, and they'll say, okay, come up front and order, and then we'll bring it to you. Things of this nature, which it's a different experience, but it's still cool. This is going to work. But
there was a robot last night at the Thai place on Capitol Hill where I had dinner. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
That does not compute for me, but I would rather have a different interaction there. But yeah, I think you're right that it is a luxury, and I think these businesses are responding. And I think the city of Seattle is trying to respond too, again, with this change in the business and occupation tax structure. So I'm hoping that could have some impact here. But there are a lot of expenses, and I kind of know what Paul's going to say, but I want to hear it anyway.
Predictable.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of like boiling the frog. After decades of raising costs in the city, and any government anywhere is responsible for creating the conditions that are necessary in order to open the doors on a business. So Seattle has incredibly high property taxes, a dozen special levies. The water utility and the power company are both owned by the government. So you have utility costs. Insurance costs can be high when there's a lack of public safety. So that has to be provided for the government. So
the private market has juiced the cost of business
sure,
as
but if businesses are making claims because their windows have been smashed or because shoplifting is causing their product to go out the door for free, of course that's going to turn around and raise the cost of insurance. So I think of something from history, which is I think it was in the 1880s, Seattle built its first fireboat on the waterfront, and insurance rates plummeted on the waterfront because of that. So in other words, the government was providing better public safety, and therefore costs went down. So the tax burden combined with the lack of public safety, I think really squeezes small businesses, and I see it in our neighborhoods as well.
Sure, yeah.
Shall we hit a few other headlines?
You bet.
Okay, aspects of this week we haven't covered. The Seattle Mariners catcher Cal Raleigh was not named the American League Most Valuable Player. You look disgusted, Brian.
He was totally jobbed. That is New York bias, big time. Aaron Judge is a great player, but come on, man. No catcher has ever done that in Major League Baseball history. Will it ever happen again? I don't know, but that was such a special season. It really bummed me out that he didn't get that. Such a cool guy.
I know very little about baseball, so I agree with Brian.
Yes.
Good. That's a good policy.
That's right. Yeah.
I mentioned that I was in Japan earlier, and you run into people and they say, "Oh, where are you from?" And I say Seattle. People immediately when they say, Cal Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Cal Raleigh is famous across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a huge baseball fan either, but you don't have to be to see that he was just the best there was this year.
Yeah. So we need to let Japanese fans vote on the Hall of Fame.
Clearly.
There we go.
Yep.
And franchise the Japanese.
There we go. Right.
Washington State says endangered gray wolves are coming back. Population up 20% last year. 15th year in a row of growth. State is considering moving gray wolves from endangered down to sensitive status. Paul, does that mean more wolf killing?
It might mean one or two. I propose this idea as a celebration of the Endangered Species Act working. The Department of Fish and Wildlife wants to change the designation of wolves, down one slot from endangered. I forget what the less endangered one is. Sensitive, thanks. And that's because populations have recovered, particularly in the eastern part of the state. It was also interesting to me that the Colville tribe, which is not subject to these regulations at all, they're
can hunt.
completely sovereign. They allow hunting on their reservation for tribal members. So see, it's limited. So I think that this is, if you want to maintain the broad support for the Endangered Species Act across the country, I think it's smart for environmental activists to celebrate some wins, and this is one of them.
Yeah, I agree.
Interesting to see that it's on the east side, though. There's just not as much. You're on the west side.
Yeah, not in the western part. Yeah.
It's expensive here.
Yeah,
right. Can't afford a den here.
The cost of sheep is really going up.
Yep. Seattle Times reports that police reported 33 arsons last month, highest in 5 years, mostly in South Seattle, including my wedding venue, the Mount Baker Community Club. Wow. Police said they didn't know how many are connected with each other. You brought this to my attention,
Yeah,
Brian.
I just thought it was frightening, and there just aren't a lot of answers right now. I think police are certainly responding to this, and fire investigators are too. But I was just kind of struck by the fact that that was such a large. It's a huge issue of public safety that often goes overlooked, and so I'm really pulling for the Seattle Fire Department and the police department to try to find some answers here, because there are a lot of communities down there that are just really scared right now.
That's right. Yeah, especially you don't want to wake up. I have friends who live in South Seattle who had an arson occur just across the street from them, and it was terrifying for them to think that in the middle of the night while they're trying to sleep that their neighbor's house is getting caught on fire.
Exactly.
Purposefully.
So this is a core public safety issue, again, going back to what the government, what the city should focus on. We'll see how the new mayor handles issues like this.
Fair.
Speaking of things that don't usually catch on fire but could, I've been meaning to buy a battery-powered bicycle, and I haven't, so I feel guilty that Rad Power Bike says it might close. They were huge, especially in the pandemic, but they have apparently sales have declined for several reasons, but they filed a layoff notice with the state. 64 jobs in Ballard might go. So if you are boycotting Starbucks, you could spend that latte money on an e-bike and keep an excellent local company around. Maybe I'll do that before they disappear.
It's your fault, pretty much,
It is.
Bill, is what I'm reading out of this. I think that's terrible news there. That was a company that was really jamming there, and I enjoy riding the bike. I haven't done the e-bike thing yet for some reason. I can't get over that hump yet.
It is so fine.
It's
What's the
liberating.
problem?
Sounds
What's your
like you
problem
can
with
get
it?
over the hump because
Yeah.
you were riding
If
in
you were on an
e-bike.
e-bump, you can get over any hump there is.
Fair. That's my issue.
Well, I just turned 60, Jack. An e-bike you can get anywhere, It's a beautiful thing.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. For a long time there, especially during the pandemic, there was this huge boom of people buying e-bikes in America. The fastest selling electric vehicle was an electric bicycle.
Yeah.
And I wonder the extent to which perhaps this is a little bit about market saturation for folks. And I the city has invested just a ton of money in safe infrastructure for folks, and I hope whether it's a Rad or any of the other providers out there that people give it a try, because it doesn't have to be hard to bike.
Even the Lime bikes and the scooters, the battery powered one, the bike share, they're fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love biking. My personal, it's just my standard is I wonder if the e-bike is cheating in a way.
Yes, it is. And I love it for that.
Yeah, I know, but what am I saying? Because with
soapbox.
Seattle's hills, I live in West Seattle too,
yeah.
and so I walk up those hills sometimes with a bike. So I'm not going to claim that I'm some great athlete, but I was disappointed to see about Rad Power Bikes, because Seattle used to have a lot of small manufacturing, small machine shops that were almost kind of in the neighborhood, and it looks like that's becoming not affordable, not viable anymore for these small businesses.
Ooh, you're just reminding me. I don't know about e-bikes, but remember the idea of a makers district in Sodo near the port? There was going to be housing and light manufacturing, and the city council voted to change the zoning for that, and the state hearings board, there was a challenge to it. We talked about environmental review earlier, right? Zoning, and that's apparently not happening now. The Port of Seattle didn't like it. They're like, hey, we got to get stuff done here. It's noisy and dangerous, and it's work. This is an industrial area.
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts on that?
A big loss for Council President Sarah Nelson, who also lost her bid for re-election here. She really spearheaded this move and really tried to pose it as something that would help with affordable housing here. But this has been tried so many different times over the years, and this conglomeration of folks at the Port of Seattle have said, hey, we have this deep water port here. You really can't find these anywhere else around the world. Anything we're doing that might restrict that, we don't want that. So I'm interested to see where this decision goes here, but I really don't think with the new complexion of the city council right now, we're going to see it come back anytime soon. That's my take.
Now they're looking to put housing somewhere.
Yeah.
Good. So I worked in SoDo for years, and it's the main challenge I can see, and the port has a point, it has to do with traffic. So if you have residential, and it's hard enough for, just Joe Civilian in his car to get around among the railroad tracks.
Yep.
There would have to be a major infrastructure change in the street layout before that area went to residential. Although, I'm not against it. If there are areas where there can be more housing, then that's a good thing.
No.
Yeah, I'm very libertarian on this issue. I think that you should. Yeah, it's we're together
They're
here.
hanging. They're hanging.
Is let people live where they want to live. Like if you don't want to have to wait in traffic on railroads, then go find another neighborhood to live in. And if that doesn't matter to you, then go ahead and enjoy living in SoDo, where you can make noise and have this like maker zone and the kind of work live. And this is I have a very heterodoxical opinion about this in the urbanist community, but certainly we need more housing in more places, and I hope that they turn this around and put more housing in.
Converted warehouses for housing.
Right,
maybe.
that happens. I need to know what made you smile this week, because the show's almost over. Did you see the video of the orcas stalking a harbor seal off Camino Island? The seal jumps onto the bow of a motorboat to escape the marauding, the hunting. Apparently these orcas are showing hunting behavior, which I wouldn't have known, but among other things, they're purposely splashing to try to knock the seal off. This is what experts say anyway, I guess. The Seattle Times interviewed the photographer, and she said, okay, I'm team orca. This is how they survive. She's taken many photos of orcas eating those seals, but she says, once one jumps onto my boat, I gotta be team seal. Not SEAL team SEAL.
Different.
That made me smile. What if she had pushed the seal off the boat in order that the endangered orcas may live?
Now she's an accomplice.
Yeah. Those aren't the endangered ones. The endangered ones eat salmon.
Right. Fair.
Yeah, it'd be a great video. I mean, if she did that. But
yes,
I'm glad she did.
That made me smile. What about anyone else?
I just wanted a big smile thinking about Lenny Wilkins, who passed away earlier this week. The Sonics legend, Seattle legend. I had the chance to interview him about, more than 10 years ago when the SoDo Arena thing was happening. I remember thinking, hey, we'll meet at this basketball court and we'll shoot some free throws and stuff. And it was very much hey, Brian, come into my office. Let's discuss. He just had such a great gravity to him, just a quiet leadership. He never yelled from the sidelines or anything like that. Just a very thoughtful, great servant leader kind of a guy, and Seattle's really going to miss him.
We didn't make the World Series, but Sonics did once win.
You better
win
believe
it all.
Yep.
Paul.
I was going to mention I took my son and some other young people to see Pirates of Penzance musical at the opera, and it was really a wonderful, fun experience. They had a great time. So this idea that the opera is stuffy and formal is not the case. And that show has wrapped up, but every season the opera does one or two of these very lighthearted, fun musicals. And also in McCaw Hall, the entire atmosphere is relaxed and kind of festive. So the term opera can put people off, but that was not the case when we went.
Okay, the kids love the Modern Major General. Alex, we got it. We're over time. How would you feel if I just said you made me smile by being here?
I would feel very good about that.
Okay, sorry, we gotta go. It's Brian Callanan. I want to tell you, Seattle News, Views, and Brews, local transportation advocate, Alex Hudson, and we've got senior researcher at Washington Policy Center, Paul Guppy. Thank you all so much.
Thanks,
Kevin
Bill.
Kennystat, Kathy Faulkner, everybody. See you again next week.
This is KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW